Your everyday shopping is about to get a lot more expensive. Some prices won't just rise, they'll spike, and it's already being planned. Brands you buy without thinking are preparing price hikes right now, while the quality quietly goes down. You'll pay more and get less. I've been tracking the warning signs companies don't advertise. The reports, the reformulations, the quiet changes. In this video, I'm exposing 12 UK brands that are likely to become much more expensive in 2026 while delivering worse quality. Most people watching already buy several of them. And the number one brand on this list is a weekly staple, and the price shock will catch most families off guard. Brand 12 Tesco own brand ranges. Tesco own brand products feel like the safest choice in the shop. They're familiar, affordable, and built into the routine of millions of UK households. From everyday food to household basics, these products are trusted because they've always delivered good enough quality at a lower price than big-name brands. Most shoppers assume that even when prices go up slightly, the product itself stays the same. What's changing is how that value is being maintained. Tesco, like other major supermarkets, is under ongoing pressure from higher supplier costs, wages, and logistics. Price increases are the obvious part, but the quieter changes happen inside the product. Own brand ranges are regularly adjusted to manage costs cheaper, substitute ingredients, increased water content, altered textures, or shorter shelf life. These changes don't need to be announced. The packaging looks familiar, the name stays the same. But loyal customers begin noticing that food doesn't taste quite right, doesn't last as long, or doesn't go as far as it used to. Looking toward 2026, the signs point to this becoming more pronounced. Tesco has already indicated continued cost control and product development, which often means making items cheaper to produce rather than better to use. For households relying on own brand to manage budgets, this creates a double hit: higher prices at the till and disappointment at home. What once felt like smart, value-driven shopping slowly turns into paying more for less, week after week. As this kind of downgrade spreads through supermarket aisles, the next brand shows what happens when the same cost-cutting mindset hits clothing, where the drop in quality is far harder to ignore. Brand 11 Asda own brand food products. Asda's own brand food has always been positioned as the answer for families trying to keep costs down. Big shelves filled with budget-friendly options, simple packaging, and the promise that you could feed more people without stretching your wallet. For years, shoppers accepted that it wasn't premium because it didn't need to be. The value was the point. That value has been quietly slipping. Across a wide range of Asda own brand food products, prices have risen while the food itself feels different at home. Ready meals don't seem as filling. Sauces feel thinner. Meat products rely more heavily on fillers. You go through items faster, even though you don't feel like you're eating more. On paper, the price increase might look small, but in practice, the shop doesn't stretch the way it used to. What makes this difficult to spot is how gradual the changes are. The packaging still looks familiar. The branding still signals budget. But when families compare portion sizes, ingredient lists, or how long food actually lasts in the fridge, the difference becomes harder to ignore. The same weekly shop now requires top-ups sooner, which quietly pushes spending higher over time. For households that rely on own brand food as a financial safety net, this is where frustration sets in. Asda own brand was supposed to absorb rising costs, not pass them on while shrinking value. When that balance breaks, shoppers are left paying more without the reassurance they once had. It doesn't feel like one dramatic downgrade, it feels like a slow loss of trust, shop by shop. And once people start noticing that even budget food no longer feels like a bargain, the disappointment spreads quickly. Because if this can happen at the lower end of the aisle, the next brand shows how much worse it gets when higher-priced treats start changing too. Brand 10 Cadbury. Cadbury is more than just chocolate in the UK. It's habit, nostalgia, and comfort. People buy it without comparing prices because it's familiar and trusted. A dairy milk bar, a bag of buttons, a seasonal favorite, these are treats people assume will always taste the same and feel worth it, even if prices inch up now and then. That trust is being tested. Chocolate prices have been under serious pressure, largely driven by rising cocoa costs, and Cadbury's response has followed a familiar pattern. Prices have increased, but that's only part of the story. Bar sizes have quietly shrunk, sharing formats have been redefined, and recipes have been subtly adjusted. Long-time buyers notice it first. The texture feels different, the sweetness hits differently, and bars don't feel as satisfying as they used to. These changes are rarely framed as cutbacks. Instead, they're hidden behind packaging redesigns, new multi-packs, or vague language about improvements. A bar that looks almost identical on the shelf might be lighter, thinner, or structured differently inside. When prices rise again, shoppers often blame inflation and move on, not realizing they're paying more for a product that's already been reduced. Heading toward 2026, the warning signs are clear. Cocoa supply issues haven't gone away, and cost pressures aren't easing. That puts Cadbury in a position where further price rises are likely, alongside continued shrinkage or reformulation. For consumers, that means a double disappointment: chocolate that costs more and delivers less of the experience people expect. What used to be a small, reliable treat becomes something you question buying at all. And if this feels bad for a product people buy as an occasional indulgence, up next is a brand most people associate with, but once you start noticing what's happening, you can't unsee it. Brand 9, McVitie's. McVitie's biscuits are a constant in UK households. Digestives, hobnobs, rich tea, these are items people keep in the cupboard without thinking. They're not treats in the luxury sense, they're everyday comforts. People buy them out of habit, assuming the price to portion balance has always been fair. That balance has started to change. Over time, McVitie's products have become noticeably more expensive, while the packs themselves feel lighter. Biscuits appear thinner, pack sizes don't stretch as far. A packet that used to last several tea breaks now seems to disappear in half the time. On the shelf, the packaging looks familiar, so most shoppers don't immediately register what's changed. Once you notice it, it's hard to unsee. The weight reductions are subtle enough to avoid shock, but frequent enough to affect value. At the same time, prices have edged upward, meaning customers are paying more for fewer biscuits. For families who buy these regularly, the cost adds up quickly, not in one dramatic jump, but through repetition. There's also the issue of quality perception. Long-time buyers often describe biscuits as feeling drier, more brittle, or less substantial than they remember. Whether it's ingredient adjustments or manufacturing changes, the experience doesn't feel as satisfying as it once did. When a biscuit meant to be simple, comfort food starts feeling disappointing, it changes how people see the brand. This is where trust quietly erodes. McVitie's relies heavily on familiarity and routine. When value slips without explanation, customers don't immediately stop buying, they just feel less satisfied each time. Over months, that dissatisfaction turns into frustration, especially when shoppers realize they're buying replacements more often than they used to. And if shrinking biscuits feel frustrating, the next replacement brand shows how this problem becomes even more obvious when it affects frozen food, where portion size is impossible to ignore. Brand 8, Bird's Eye. Bird's Eye has always been associated with reliability. Frozen fish fingers, peas, chicken products, food people buy because it's easy, familiar, and supposed to make life simpler. For families, Bird's Eye isn't a luxury brand. It's a dependable freezer staple that promises consistent portions and predictable meals. That's why the changes stand out so clearly once you notice them. Prices on Bird's Eye products have risen, but portions don't feel as generous as they once were. Fish fingers seem smaller, packs feed fewer people. Some meals that used to comfortably serve a family now feel like they fall short, forcing people to add extras or cook more than planned. Because frozen food is portion controlled, it's harder to hide these shifts. When a box that once covered dinner now leaves someone still hungry, the downgrade is obvious. Shoppers start doing the maths in real time, buying 2 packs instead of 1, spending more just to achieve the same result they used to get automatically. There's also a quality perception issue. Some customers feel that texture and flavor have changed, especially in products with coatings or fillings. Fish feels thinner, coatings feel heavier. Meals feel more processed. Whether it's ingredient sourcing, portion adjustments, or manufacturing changes, the end result is the same. The product doesn't feel as satisfying for the price being charged. Over time, this chips away at trust. Bird's Eye built its reputation on feeding families easily and reliably. When prices rise and portions shrink, that promise weakens. Instead of feeling like a safe freezer option, the brand starts to feel expensive for what it delivers. And when even frozen staples stop stretching the way they used to, the problem becomes impossible to ignore. Because the next replacement brand shows this happening in snacks, people buy almost automatically where the bag looks familiar, but the value inside has quietly vanished. Brand 7, Heinz. Heinz products are staples in UK households. Ketchup, baked beans, soups, sauces. These are items people buy on autopilot because they've trusted them for decades. Heinz isn't just a brand, it's a default. When shoppers reach for it, they assume they're paying a little extra for consistency, quality, and taste that never changes. That consistency is starting to slip. Over recent years, Heinz products have faced repeated price increases, often justified by rising ingredient and production costs. But alongside those higher prices, shoppers have begun noticing subtle changes. Sauces taste slightly different, textures feel altered, portions don't stretch as far as they used to. In some cases, recipes have been adjusted to reduce costs, using cheaper inputs or different ratios, while packaging and branding stay reassuringly familiar. What makes this frustrating is how quietly it happens. A bottle looks the same on the shelf, but costs more than it did before. A tin still carries the Heinz name, but no longer delivers the same experience people remember. Because Heinz is so embedded in routine shopping, many consumers blame themselves, assuming their tastes have changed rather than questioning the product. Looking toward 2026, the direction feels clear. If cost pressures remain, Heinz is likely to continue leaning on price increases and recipe tweaks to protect margins. That leaves shoppers paying premium prices for products that no longer feel premium. What was once a safe, reliable choice slowly becomes questionable value, especially for families buying these items week after week. And while that's disappointing in the cupboard, the next brand takes the issue even further because it involves food people rely on for quick, affordable meals outside the home. Brand 6, Greggs. Greggs built its reputation on being cheap, comforting, and reliable. A sausage roll, a bake, a coffee on the go, it was food people grabbed without thinking because it felt like good value. For years, the appeal was simple: filling food at prices that didn't hurt. That value has been slipping, slowly enough that many customers don't immediately notice. Prices have increased across popular items, and what once felt like pocket change food now adds up quickly. At the same time, portions feel less generous, and ingredient quality has subtly shifted. Pastries don't always feel as substantial, fillings feel lighter, and the overall experience doesn't match the price the way it used to. What makes this shift frustrating is how emotional Greggs is for many people. It's tied to routine, nostalgia, and comfort. When prices rise, customers tolerate it, assuming it's unavoidable. But when the food no longer feels satisfying, that tolerance wears thin. People leave hungry sooner, buy extra items, or feel shortchanged after what used to be a guaranteed fix. This kind of change rarely happens in one big moment. It happens through small increases, quiet adjustments, and gradual normalization. Customers adapt without realizing they're spending more for less satisfaction. Over time, Greggs risks losing what made it special, not because people stop liking it, but because it no longer feels like a bargain worth defending. And if this feels disappointing for food bought on the go, the next brand takes the same strategy into the home-affecting products people use every single day. Brand 5, Nestle UK. Nestle products are everywhere in UK homes. Cereals, snacks, chocolate, coffee, pet food. Many people consume at least one Nestle-owned product every single day without realizing it. These brands feel familiar, established, and safe. Even when prices go up, shoppers tend to assume they're still getting the same thing they always have. What's changed is how much value is actually left in the product. Across multiple Nestle brands, shrinkflation has become increasingly noticeable. Boxes get narrower, portions get smaller, multi-packs quietly lose an item. At the same time, prices don't stay still, they continue to rise, often justified by ingredient costs or supply chain issues. The result is paying more while the product itself physically gives you less. Alongside size reductions, recipe adjustments play a role. To manage costs at scale, ingredients are tweaked, sweeteners are altered, and formulations are adjusted to hit price targets. These changes are subtle enough to pass most people by, but regular buyers notice it first. Something tastes different, it's less filling, you go through it faster. The product doesn't feel as satisfying as it once did. The most frustrating part is how invisible this becomes over time. Because the branding stays familiar and the changes happen gradually, shoppers don't feel ripped off in one dramatic moment. Instead, they slowly adapt, buying more often, spending a little extra, and wondering why the food cupboard empties faster than it used to. That's how value erosion works best, quietly, consistently, and without triggering alarm. And before we move on, this is the point in the video where it really helps to pause for a second. If this is already changing how you look at everyday brands, hit like and subscribe, because the biggest names and the biggest shocks are still coming. And if this feels bad for a product people buy as an occasional indulgence, the next brand hits much closer to home. Brand 4, Walker's Crisps and Snacks. Walker's Crisps are one of the most automatic purchases in the UK. Multi-packs for lunches, grab bags from the corner shop, family sharing bags for nights in people don't think about them, they just grab them. The brand feels familiar, reliable, and unchanged, which makes it easy to assume the value is still the same. That assumption doesn't hold up once you start paying attention. Prices for Walker's Crisps have risen steadily, but the bags themselves feel noticeably lighter. Grab bags don't feel as generous. Multi-packs don't last as long. Even larger sharing bags seem to empty far quicker than people expect. The packaging looks almost identical, so most shoppers don't realize what's changed until they open the bag. This is where shrinkflation hits hardest. Crisps are mostly air, so even small reductions in weight have a big psychological impact. When the bag looks full but finishes quickly, it creates an immediate sense of being shortchanged. Parents notice it when multi-packs no longer cover the week. Adults notice it when a treat doesn't feel worth the price anymore. There's also a growing perception that quality hasn't improved to justify the cost. Flavors feel less intense. Portions of seasoning feel lighter. You end up eating the bag faster, not because you enjoyed it more, but because there was less there to begin with. When prices rise at the same time, that gap between expectation and reality becomes hard to ignore. Over time, this changes behavior. People stop seeing Walker's as a default and start questioning whether it's worth it at all. That's dangerous territory for a brand built on habit. Because once customers notice they're paying more for less, every purchase feels slightly disappointing, and disappointment is what breaks loyalty. And when snacks you buy without thinking start to feel like bad value, it raises a bigger question. If this is happening with crisps, what's going on with the sauces, spreads, and staples people rely on every single day? Brand 3, Kellogg's. Kellogg's cereals have been part of UK mornings for generations. Cornflakes, Rice Krispies, Cocoa Pops, these are products people grow up with and continue buying without much thought. Parents trust them, kids recognize them, and the brand carries an assumption of consistency. When the box is on the shelf, people expect the same breakfast they've always known. What's changed is how much you're actually getting for the price. Boxes have become smaller, sometimes subtly enough that it's only noticeable when you pour the last bowl sooner than expected. At the same time, prices have risen steadily, turning what used to be a cheap family staple into one of the more expensive items in the cereal aisle. The shelf price doesn't always look shocking until you compare weight and cost side by side. Beyond size, there's also the issue of formulation. To manage costs and comply with changing regulations, cereals have been adjusted over time. Sugar levels shift, textures change, and ingredients are altered in ways that regular buyers can sense even if they can't immediately explain it. The cereal doesn't taste quite the same. It goes soggy faster. It feels less filling, especially for kids who end up asking for another bowl. The real impact shows up in routine. Families go through boxes faster, spend more replacing them, and slowly accept higher costs as normal. Because Kellogg's feels like a default choice, many shoppers don't reassess whether it's still worth the price, they just keep buying out of habit. That's how a small downgrade turns into a long-term expense. And if this feels worrying for something as basic as breakfast, The next brand affects nearly every cupboard and bathroom in the country, where rising prices are paired with products that simply don't work as well as they used to. Brand 2, Unilever UK Food Brands. Unilever food brands sit quietly in almost every UK kitchen. Sauces, stocks, spreads, dressings, products people rely on to make meals taste right without much effort. Names like Hellmann's, Knorr, and Marmite feel so established that most shoppers don't question them. If it worked before, they assume it still works now. What's become more noticeable is how much these products cost compared to how long they last. Jars, bottles, and packets have crept up in price, yet many people feel they're getting through them faster than they used to. Mayonnaise runs out sooner, stock cubes don't stretch as far, sauces feel thinner or less impactful, meaning you use more just to get the same flavor. A big reason for this is quiet reformulation. To manage rising costs at scale, recipes are adjusted, concentrations change, ingredients are swapped, and textures shift. These changes are rarely advertised. At best, you'll see vague language like new recipe. At worst, there's no mention at all. The packaging looks the same, so shoppers assume nothing has changed and adapt by using more product each time. That's where the real expense hides. When you need extra spoonfuls to get the same taste, the product empties quicker, and you're back at the shop sooner. What looks like a modest price rise turns into a much higher ongoing cost. Because these are staples, people don't stop buying them, they just absorb the extra spending without realizing how much it adds up. Over time, this erodes trust. These brands were built on reliability and consistency. When performance drops while prices rise, the value promise quietly collapses. People don't feel angry all at once, they feel worn down, constantly spending more just to maintain the same meals at home. And when even flavor-building essentials start to feel like poor value, it highlights just how widespread this shift has become across the food aisle. Brand 1, Warburton's bread. Packaged bread is one of the most routine purchases in the UK. People grab it without thinking because it's a staple toast in the morning, sandwiches for work or school, something that's always just there. Brands like Warburton's or Kingsmill have built decades of trust by being consistent, soft, and reliable. When prices rise a little, most shoppers barely question it because bread feels essential. That's exactly why changes here hit harder than anywhere else. Over time, prices have crept up, but what people notice more is how the bread behaves once it's home. Loaves go stale faster, texture feels different, slices tear more easily. The bread doesn't stay fresh the way it used to, even when stored properly. Many shoppers find themselves throwing it away sooner or buying replacements more often. These issues often come from cost-saving changes that aren't obvious on the shelf. Adjustments to ingredients, preservatives, and production methods can all affect freshness and structure. The loaf looks the same, the branding hasn't changed, but the experience has. Because bread is so habitual, people blame storage, weather, or themselves, not realizing the product itself has been altered. This is where the cost really adds up. Bread that goes stale faster means more waste, more trips to the shop, more money spent replacing something that used to last longer. When the price has already risen, that waste feels even worse. What should be the cheapest, most reliable item in the basket becomes a constant frustration. And because bread is bought weekly, sometimes daily, any downgrade is felt immediately. There's no adjustment period. You notice it at breakfast, at lunch, and when you throw half a loaf away. It's the clearest example of paying more while getting less, not in theory, but in everyday life. And if this video helped you see your shopping habits differently, share it with family or friends, especially the ones who do the weekly shop. A single heads up can save people real money over time. Finally, if you want more breakdowns like this, honest, practical, and focused on what actually affects everyday life, make sure you subscribe. Because the brands don't announce these changes, but we can spot them together.